and orthopedic cases, or us, we all have some untapped existing potential. Untapped means that some potential which we have never used. So PNF says use those potential in the treatment. So that's how it works, And the first definition I was telling you that it's a motor learning approach used in the neuromotor development. Now, when we talk about the PNF, we need to understand the motor learning and motor control. I'm not going to go to the detail of the motor learning motor approach because I can extend it up to the 2 hours also. So the first thing I want to tell you about the motor learning, if many of you must be in the group like a righty and some of you must be lefty. So if you are right dominating people, and if you have a pen and copy right now, I would ask each and everyone to write your name with your left hand right now. If you are lefty, just write your name with your right hand right now. It's a little exercise for all of you people. Just a little exercise. So if you're righty, just write from your left hand. If you're lefty, write down your name from your right hand. And I'm just waiting for a few seconds. So Gurfan, are you there?
Yes, sir. Many of them are trying to join us, but there is an issue with that they are facing. I don't know what's happening.
Okay, I think it's
105
somewhere on the web.
people have joined, but more
I
are not
I
able
think
to join.
I think it's somewhere. I think 150 or 200 people can join this WebEx. I believe so. So, guys, I think you must have done that stuff. And if somebody wants to share the feedback, like how did you find it? By writing your name from your non-dominating hand. Yeah. So you can just write down in the message. You
Sir, there
can
is
just
a
type that.
question that we have. How can the PNF help the musculo conditions?
Okay, that's fine. Uh, can we just answer this question a little later after telling the PNF concept?
Yes, sir. We'll
That
keep this
that
at
would be
the
better.
end. No problem.
Exactly. That's what we'll do. So now, when I ask you people to write down your name from your non-dominating hand, it was quite difficult. Of course, it's difficult for me as well. Why so? Because that's all about the motor learning to the brain. But when we were child, when we were like 2 years old, 3 years old, or 4 years old, when we were child, we were taught by our parents to write from either from right hand or the left hand. It was difficult for us that time, but over the period, we learn it, and it became easy for us, and it became as autonomic motor learning to the brain, right? But if you like, suppose you just wrote down your name from the non-dominant hand right now, and it was difficult for you people. But if you repeat this same activity for next 20 days, the 21st day it will be easy for you, because that would be like a motor learning to the brain. That's how we feed our brain, and that's how anything we do with our recovery, like neurology or orthopedic, it's all about motor learning and motor control, and that's what the PNF say. It's a motor learning approach. So everything becomes easy if we start teaching our brain about the same. I always say for my patients, especially in my neuro cases, that's I even I have slogan at my clinic that don't exercise the body every time. Sometimes you have to exercise the brain if you want to recover your neurological patients. That's very important. The call in between. Okay, so this was all about the definition of the PNF and some of the little I mean information about the PNF. If I just want to go for like a little about the motor learning and the motor approach, motor control, sorry. So motor learning, we have three phases basically. Uh, we have basically three phases, and the first comes to the cognitive, and the second comes to our associate, and the third comes to our autonomic. I'm not going into the detail of it, but if I talk about the cognitive, it's all about when we give tasks to our patient. So it's all about understanding the task of by the patients, like any kind of activity we give. And if you talk about the second stage, like associative, it's all about the patient start understanding the task. and the spatial organization becomes fast in the brain, and the task becomes easy to understand. When we talk about autonomic, it's all about getting control on the activities. Like if I talk about some patients, if I give an example of a patient, like if somebody get the stroke and get the right side hemiparesis, and if I ask my patient that you have to get a bottle, wait a second, and if I just teach my patient that this is the bottle, you have to go to the mouth. So the first stage, the patient understand, okay, this I have to do this movement. In the second stage, the patient start repeating this movement, understands well, start repeating. In the third stage, in the autonomic, it goes very well with the fine skills and good control. If I talk about the lower limb, when the patient start walking in the sideways, forward, backward direction, that goes to the autonomic. So that what just we need to understand. Again, if I talk about the motor control, it's a big concept. Again, I can chat about the whole day, but according to the PNF, according to some of the research models, we have divided motor control into the four stages. The first stage comes about mobility. So, and if I'm moving even my finger right now, if I'm moving my wrist right now, if I just stand or if I just do anything, any movement, like my lips are moving, so that's the first stage, mobility. The second stage come to the stability. First is mobility. The second is stability. So if I'm sitting right now, I'm able to keep my posture. I'm able to keep my trunk stable. That's a stage of stability. If I stand right now, that's a stage of stability. The third stage comes about controlled mobility, or you can say another word, mobility on stability. I will repeat again, controlled mobility or mobility on stability. So suppose you walk right now, your one leg is stable and the another is moving. The leg which is in stance phase is stable, and the leg which is swing phase is movable at the same time. So that's all about mobility on stability. So we do a lot of exercises. Like suppose we train our patients. We keep the trunk stable and we ask them to move from the arm or from the leg. So that's all about mobility on stability. When we talk about the fourth stage of the motor control, that's the skills training. So we start working on the skills, and that comes to the fourth stage, right? So any of the questions till right now, if you guys have any of the questions, I will answer like these kind of questions, the importance of the PNF in MSK condition and all. We'll talk about that in the later on. Any questions till now, if anyone is having, or we can move forward.
Sir, there is a question, which is the best book to read for PNF?
Uh, Susan Adler, Dominic Beckers. I think I have downloaded a copy of the same. I can share it. I can share it with you people. That's Susan Adler and Dominic Bakers. I also have been writing a book from last 1.5 year. Probably this Corona has spoiled everything, and that should be published by the end of this year or maybe the early of next year. Let's see that. But Dominic Bakers and Susan Adler, I mean, that's the book. I love it about the PNF, and you guys can go through that. So I can probably send you and in the group. So we have the group, right? WhatsApp group. So I'll just put in the WhatsApp group the download to copy of the same. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
I'll share that. Any other query till now? Okay. So as we just move forward, again, I just want to share you without taking so much of time that the PNF was started in 1940s. So there was a neurologist, Dr. Herman Kebart, and there was a physiotherapist, Maggie Note, and there was an Australian nurse, Kenny. She was nurse, Kenny. So they were working together in USA. And one day Kenny was using like these kind of diagonal methods and all, activating methods. And the Herman Kebart found them to be effective. And he discussed with the Maggie Note, who was physical therapist, Maggie Note. I think you must have read into the books also, Maggie Note. So they discussed together and they developed some of the patterns, some of the diagonal patterns, and they work first time on the patient of a multiple sclerosis, one of the child, and the child got much better. So the parents of the child funded for Kaiser Foundation in California, which is the mother center of the PNF in the USA. It's a big hospital based on the PNF, and it still runs on. Yeah, so that's lovely center, and all was funded by that time by the parents of the child of the patient. So guys, it's an idea for all of you that if you get a rich patient, maybe you can ask them to fund for your clinic. This is just a funny advice. So if we talk about after this how it started, and then we talk about the philosophy of the PNF, that how it what is the philosophy of the PNF. The first thing we talk about the positive approach. Now, what is positive approach? If you guys want to write down, you can write down the positive approach. So positive approach is all about the positive assessment first. So suppose like a patient comes to you with right hemiplegia or paraplegia or left hemiplegia or like with severe disability, comes to your clinic, or with some kind of bad pain, and the patient comes to clinic and you go to the patients, you take them on the couch and you go to the right side. Suppose there is a right hemiparesis patient, and you say that this is so weak and your right leg is also so weak, and we'll try to improve it. So this is fine. Like, you are doing your assessment and you are telling your patient, but this is more like a negative approach, to be honest. If a patient comes to my clinic with right hemiparesis, what I do is that I go to the left side, I go to the positive part of the body, and I start working on them, and I say that, wow, this is lovely. You have lots of good strength in your left side. Left arm is so good. Your left leg is so good. Your trunk is so good. Okay, you have got some weakness in your right arm, but that will be recovered in few days. So that's all about going and assessing the positive part of the body first and giving a positive mindset to your patient. It works actually. Yesterday I got a patient in my clinic. I'm telling you a true story, honest story, and the patient came with severe TMJ pain. So I did some chiropractic manipulation also, and I did PNF dynamic reversal for the jawline, and the patient got much better. But the husband of patient told me that they went to one of the orthopedic, and the orthopedic was like, it might get better, it might not get better. Let's see. And they said that we ran away from. So they just left the clinic of the orthopedic because they were so depressed after hearing all this stuff. So it's all about positive assessment. Then we talk about set up the goals for the patient. Then we talk about indirect treatment. Now, what is indirect treatment? We are going to talk about. And then we talk about no pain or respect pain. Now, guys, this is very important. No pain or respect pain. And it's not about PNF. Even if you apply any kind of approach on your patients, even if you're giving the soft tissue mobilization, how does it matter? I tell you something. Uh, have you treated the patients of elbow fractures, the fractures on the radius and the ulna near the elbow joints, or if you have the cases of tibia and fibular fractures around the knee joints? What happens to them after the bone gets unite, or after the post surgery? The movement becomes really stiff, right? And the chances of becoming the myositis ossification as well. Now, what happened? I have seen a couple of my colleagues. Not everybody does that, but some of my colleagues have done it, and I have seen them that they go to the patient and they are like, "We are gonna get the movement, full movement on the day one." I don't know. It's the ego thing, or maybe their way of working. They start working on the patient. They start doing the stretching, like the elbow flexion, elbow extension, or the knee extension, knee flexion, and they become so aggressive. And the patient starts crying. The patient starts screaming. The patient like, "Doc is paining me," but the therapist is like, "No, I have to do it." At the same time, if I see the stroke patient with the flexor synergy pattern or the extensor synergy pattern in the lower limb with classic spasticity, and you are like that, I'm going to break the spasticity right now, and you start doing the stretching, so the aggressive stretching, and the patient starts screaming, what happens exactly? The next day the patient don't want to see you again, because the patient gets the fear factor in the mind about the exercise or the physiotherapy. So guys, we should respect the pain of the patient, or we should not give the pain to the patient. There are hundreds of ways to reduce spasticity or the tightness. I do stretching. I do a lot of things to relieve the spasticity. but I never give the pain to my patient. Or if I give the maybe a very mild or very little. So we need to understand this concept actually. Okay. So then we talk about the some of the skills like functional skills. I hope some of you must be using the MAS motor assessment scale, or some of you must be using functional independence image scale, FIM and the MAS. Those are really good, I mean, the skills to work with. You must be using MMT for muscle strength. You must be using modified actual skill for your spasticity grading, but they just scale ICF. So that's a big scale. Again, we can talk about the whole day, but you can download from the Google ICF. It's a lovely scale to it. So you can just check with that stuff. Okay. Now coming to the basic procedures and the principles, basic procedures for our of the PNF basically. So the first thing I'm gonna come is the manual contact. How do we touch our patient when we do any PNF? How do we hold our patients? So Meti Desai has raised your hand. Yeah, there was some question also. I think. What was the question?
So the question is, how can PNF work for post TKR?
Okay, it's amazing to be honest, but I believe so. You must have not heard about that. The PNF role in post TKR. When I was working with the Max Hospital in 2016, I used to see patient of Dr. J. Maheshwari. We have read the book of Maheshwari, and I used to do PNF with all the post TKR and the THR. So when we talk about the post TKR, it's not just about quadriceps and the hamstring. It's much more about the glutes as well. And with the PNF, from the day one, with the indirect approach, we can recruit the glutes. So maybe I'll show you the techniques if I can show, or I will send the link of that one to the group. So we work on the indirect approach and we recruit the glutes. At the same time, we work with the PNF pattern in the limited range of the lower limb with them, because that gives a much better coordination and that gives a much better stability and the active range of motion to the brain. So that's really good to work with the PNF pattern of the lower limb. Indirect irradiation treatment for the glutes. Uh, in the standing again, the weight shifting with the PNF, recruitment of the glutes and the stability on the standing with them, and the gait training post TKR with the PNF. So it's it's a really, really good scope of the PNF in them. Okay. So we can go further. So we were talking about the manual contact. Now this is lumbrical grip. If all of you can make this. Can you put on the video for each and everyone, if it is possible? Or you guys can not your speaker, but if you guys can put your video on, if it's possible, that's fine. Otherwise, no. I mean, that's fine.
Guys,
Okay, no worries.
on your video future that so
Yeah,
that you can follow some instructions that are given by sir.
I think I could see one or two people. I think so. Yeah, yeah. So just make this way. This is lumbrical grip. Okay, like a crocodile is going to bite you. Yeah. So this is lumbrical grip, and this is how we hold our patient. This is my mass grip. So we do not hold the patient like this. Suppose I want to do some upper limb pattern. We do not hold like this. We do not hold like this. We hold like this. Maybe sometime because of like if somebody is having very tiny hands, or and the patient is so bulky or so heavy, then you might then probably you might need to adapt to the new kind of grip. But otherwise, you always use this lumbrical grip. And you know what, like I just want to tell you, it's not about doing any pattern. It's not about doing any movement. It's all about quality of movement. Quality of movement pattern. how how better you can do it, that all matters actually. The way you hold your patient, the way you give command to patient, the way you give resistance, that matters everything. So the first thing, so you guys can write down this. I mean, these are the basic procedures
Excuse
for the
me, sir.
PNF.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I've got a notification that the meeting will end in 5 minutes. So can we
So
come
we
back
can,
again?
why not? Why not? I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the lumbrical grip we use in the as a manual contact. The first procedure is manual contact, and we use the lumbrical grip. Now it should be against the movement. Suppose I'm going for flexion abduction pattern, my hand should come over the top of it. So it should be against the movement direction. Okay. The second thing we talk about is our verbal stimulus. Now, what is verbal stimulus? It is all about activating, preparation, and command. Now, what is preparation? Like, suppose you want to do anything with your client, you want to do anything with your patient, or if suppose you perform it on your therapist also, you should prepare it. You should tease the movement first. Suppose because my patient do not know about flexion, abduction, extension pattern. My patient do not know about that, so I need to teach first. So I need to speak that I'm going to do this procedure with you, and you have to cooperate with me. Preparation, then you have to activate them, and then you have to correct them if they are doing the wrong. The third procedures we talk about is the visual stimulus. So first was the your manual contact, the second was verbal, and the third is visual stimulus. Now, how it is important? Whenever we talk about visual stimulus, we talk about keep the goal in the vision. So whatever a patient is doing, like any kind of movement, if the patient look at that movement, it always gets better. How's that? I just want to tell you. Suppose many of you must have seen the patient of Parkinson, right? And when we talk about the Parkinson's, we talk about the short stepping gaits. Fascinating field. But we always talk about short stepping gaits. You keep telling your Parkinson patient that take a big steps, but the sometimes patient do not follow that. We have several methods of gait training for the Parkinson patient in the PNF. But if I talk about the simple stuff like what I do with my Parkinson patient, I just take kineso taping or I take any kind of colorful tape and I put on the grounds. I put on the floor like with the foot markings, and I ask my patient to go on the same, and my patient does it really good. And if I repeat it for 20 days, the 21st day the patient does even better, because that's all about the visual stimulus to the mind that these here I have to put my steps, and the step length and the stride length gets better. It really works actually. At the same time, suppose I take my arm into flexion, abduction, exhortation, or if somebody, yes, if I take my arm into this pattern basically, and if somebody force me down from the top of it to bring it, somebody me external, and if I try to resist it, and somebody keep pushing me, I will not be able to hold it if I don't look it up. You want to try it? You can try it with today with some your patient or with your family. I will not be able to hold it if I look down. The someone who is giving the extra pressure will be able to take my hand down. But at the same time, if I look at my arm up, if I look at towards my arm, I will be able to hold my hand against that force. Probably. Why so? Because the moment we are looking up, it's a visual stimulus, and what is happening is that there's a recruitment of more motor units. So we have motor units, right? We have motor units. So it's basically activation of more motor units, and we can hold against that. So keep the goal in the vision matters a lot actually. Now the fourth stuff we talk about is resistance. We use resistance in the PNF a lot for strengthening, for training, for facilitations. So when we talk about the resistance, we talk about optimal resistance. Now, what is optimal resistance? It's all about the resistance which is enough for the purposeful movement. There are a lot of articles which suggest that 20 to 25% of the resistance which we can offer in the maximum is fair enough. Like suppose if I do go for any movement and if I can offer my maximum, but if I offer just 20% or 25% of it, that is fair enough for my patient to activate or to strengthen the muscles. So that's all about optimal resistance. Then we talk about stretch. When we talk about the stretch, we talk about initial stretch, which initial stretch we stretch the muscles. When we start the patterns, we take the arm into the elongation, and we Insta ID because and you guys can go for lots of my PNF videos there. So that's my Insta ID, and I have so many things over there. I usually put each and every day one video of procedure of the PNF. So you guys can just go for it. So that's DR 20, and you can go for the same. Okay, so we'll have to wrap up a little early because I have a patient from 4 o'clock, and so I'm just gonna be going for a little fast now. Okay, so we talk about manual contact, we talk about verbal stimulus, we talk about visual stimulus, we talk about resistance, then we talk about stretch, and we talk about traction and approximation. Now, what is traction? Traction is all about distracting the joint. We use traction methods many times in the PNF. We use approximation many times in the PNF. Approximation is all about closing the joints. So it's all about like uh, compressing the joints basically. Like if I stand right now, there's approximation towards my hip joint itself. So then we talk about body mechanics. Now, what is body mechanics? You must heard about biomechanics, of course. The body mechanics is all about relation of the position of the therapist in relation to position of the patients. So we should be standing diagonal to the patients. That's all matters in the PNF. So again, I have that video on my Instagram about that body mechanics. So you guys can go and you can check that. And then we talk about patterns. Yes. Now, what are the patterns basically? So from where these patterns came? Why do we need to learn these patterns? That matters. So these patterns are the three-dimensional movements. Once again, I'm repeating. These are the three-dimensional movements which are present in human body as basic movements. So these are present in our body already as basic movements. We have not got these patterns from somewhere else, from the different universe. No, we just found them inside our body. Like I want to give you an example. Some of you must be driving car, or if you do not drive your car, you must be sitting on the front seat or the back seat, and you must be putting the car seat belt, right? When you put the car seat belt, how do you put that? You put this way. You put this way, isn't it? You put this way. You never put straight. When you take a glass of water, how do you take that? You pick the glass and you go to the mouth. You never go straight. For the girls, like you do the lipstick in the morning, if you put or whenever, how do you do that? You go diagonally this way with the elbow flexion. But if I extend the elbow in the same, that goes to my flexion, adduction, excitation pattern of the PNF. If I want to comb my hairs, everybody does that. I didn't do today, sorry. So if I want to comb my hairs, the moment I take comb and I go over there, that goes to my pattern. Because if I extend my elbow, that goes to my flexion, abduction, excitation pattern. Somebody does the dance like Katha dance, Bharatnatyam, like Indian traditional dance, or somebody does the salsa like Western dance. The movement, the lot of movements goes that goes in the diagonals. Suppose you see somebody's playing the tennis, like putting the serve or putting the volley or the fast bowler. The moment they throw the ball, the arm goes in the diagonal. So, do they know about the PNF? No, they don't know anything about the PNF. They are just doing their work. But what is the idea that 70 to 80% of the activity which we do in daily living, I'm talking about 70 I'm not talking about 100% activity, but most of the activity which we do in daily living, we do in the diagonal or modified diagonal movements. And that's why we found those movement patterns and we started working on the same. Now, I want to ask you people, that's very logical stuff, very logical question from all of you. If my fast bowler, like if there's a fast bowler or there's a spinner bowler, gets injured his shoulder, gets tendinitis changes or maybe impingement syndrome or risk of weakness, injury, whatever, start getting the shoulder problem. The moment he throws the ball, the pain comes in the shoulder. Now, if I see the clip into the, if I see those clips, the moment they throw the ball into slow motion, I could relate that to the extension, adduction, and interrotation pattern. Now, we just talk about motor learning in the beginning of our webinar. That if you write from your dominating hand, it's easy, but if you write from your non-dominant hand, it's difficult for you. Now, if my athlete gets injured his shoulder, and if I start working on their flexion movements, abduction movements, or my interrotation, acceleration movements, the shoulder will get better definitely. With the laser, with the ice cube, with the movement, it will get better. But if I start training them into the patterns, the brain will learn fast, isn't it? Because that's how we are feeding the brain about the movements which the person was doing from years. Suppose I'm training my brain now about this 100 times, this 100 times, and this 100 times, the brain will learn it. The muscles will recover. But these are not functional activities for the patient, because the functional activity was going into the diagonal. But at the same time, if I start training them into the PNF diagonals, the brain will learn fast, because those movements they have been doing it over the years. That's why it becomes very, very important to train my neuro patients, orthopedic patients, or my sports patient into the PNF patterns. So PNF patterns are the three-dimensional movements which are present in human body, and that's what we need to understand. Now, one last thing I want to tell you about the PNF procedures and principles. Irradiation, guys, this is amazing, and this is the most beautiful thing I find about my most beautiful thing I find about the PNF. Now, what is irradiation and reinforcement? These words comes together. Reinforcement is the word maybe you must have heard about in the MFR or MET also, but irradiation probably not. I don't know. So irradiation is all about radiation of the impulse from one part of the body to the another part of the body. Once again, irradiation is the radiation of the impulse from one part of the body to the another part of the body. So basically, it is the radiation of the impulse from the positive part of the body to the negative part of the body, or from the strong part of the body to the weaker part of the body. How do we do that? Suppose I get a paraplegia patient with a spinal cord injury. The moment I start working on the trunk stability by approximations and different techniques, the hundreds of techniques I can work with the trunk, with the PNF. Now, if the legs are completely weak, if the legs are completely gone, like maybe grade 1 flicker contraction or the 0 or 1 plus or 2 minus, I might be doing passive movements 100 times, 200 times, 300 times, and I get tired and I say, give me my money and see you tomorrow. And the next day, same thing again. Yes, we get the recovery, but sometimes the muscles are not being fired enough, and it remains flaccid or remains spastic, and we never develop the strength. Indirect treatment or irradiation treatment is one of the best for such kind of patients. It's the beauty. What I do is that I use the trunk, I use the upper limbs, I can use the upper limbs, I give this intense resistance. We use the optimal resistance in the PNF, but when we give the irradiation technique or the procedure, we use intense resistance. So we give intense resistance to the movement of the positive part, which results into the flow of the impulse from the positive part to the negative part. And it activates that, or it fires up those weaker muscles. It reinforces them. It's really lovely technique. I have many videos on my Instagram regarding the same. It's really, really lovely to work with that. In fact, I have some videos with the stroke patient and some videos with my sports athletes also of the irradiation principle. So it's such a beauty irradiation. You can read it out further. Irradiation is such a beauty of the PNF. Now, how many patterns we have in the PNF? I have a question from all of you. I don't know if some of you must have attended my any of workshop or webinar, but if you can answer me, anyone in the group, somebody say four. Four for UL. I'm talking about the whole body. Not the exact figure, that's fine, but around like how many? Whole body age. Asma says, okay. Anybody else? 18, Rachasi, all right. Mm-hmm. 8, 8, all right. Okay, no worries, guys. So, to be honest, we have patterns around 40, okay? We have around 40 patterns in the PNF. We have 4 upper limbs, we have 4 lower limbs, we have 4 scapula, we have 4 pelvis, we have 4 head and neck, we have 4 trunk patterns, we have thrust patterns, we have bilateral, symmetrical, bilateral, asymmetrical, reciprocal, and same directional for upper limb. We have bilateral, symmetrical, and asymmetrical, reciprocal, and same directional for lower limbs. We have chopping and lifting patterns, which are combination of upper limb and your trunk patterns. We have we have so many patterns to work with, so many patterns you can't even think of it. So, and that's how we can play with the human body in many ways. All right. So, lot of patterns to work with. But as a therapist, we need to analyze which pattern has to be done and when to be done. And it's not just about learning. Who said zero? It's not just about learning these patterns, it's about learning its clinical relevance. Now, if I talk about one pattern right now, suppose I talk about flexion, abduction, excitation pattern. Abduction, adduction means abduction, adduction. In Europe, they call it AB and adduction. So I'm just I learn from them basically. So I'm just used to that talking like that stuff. So if I talk about flexion, abduction, and excitation pattern, one pattern, if I'm just talking about right now. And if I start finding its clinical utilization, that's what we need to discuss it now. Okay, you must have seen the case of frozen shoulder, many of you. What are the movements affected mostly in the frozen shoulder? Which are the movements which are mostly affected in the frozen shoulder? Retraction, retraction not at shoulder, but at a scapula, of course, yeah. Rotation, abduction, yeah. People are messaging, yeah. So the abduction is one of the most common, of course, and the flexion is again it's get limited, and the rotation, yeah, the external or the interrotation. But what we find most, I mean, the usual in the initial stages is the flexion, abduction, and the external, basically most of that, and yeah, of course, the extension also, of course, but the beginning of that I'm talking about. Maybe someone might begin with the extension also. But I'm just talking about that we have a pattern. We have just one pattern. We have just one pattern, flexion, abduction, extension pattern, and that is covering 3 movements. At the same time, I have a pattern, extension, adduction, interrotation, which is covering the another movements. So rather than working on my single movements, like I do sometime also like the glides, the manual therapy glides, the Mulligan and the Matlin. I do that also. But mostly nowadays, I just work with the PNF. And trust me, it just take me 7 or 8 sessions totally to recover a frozen shoulder patient. That's it. With the motor control, I'm talking about. With the good strength training also. Sometime maybe 10, 12, but otherwise, average 7, 8 sessions. Because what I do with them is that I just take the arm into the flexion, abduction, extension pattern. I start training these patterns and I start working with the hold relax technique of the PNF. We'll come to the techniques of the PNF. So hold relax is such a beautiful technique of the PNF, in which we build the static contractions followed by the relaxation, and we increase the range of motion. So the hold relax increase the range of motion and it reduce the pain also. Once I increase my range of motion and the traction within the pattern of the PNF, I start working with the dynamic reversal technique of the PNF. We'll come to that technique. And that gives me much better coordination of the movement, give the strength training, and it helps in getting active range of motion improvement. So dynamic reversal is such a beautiful technique of the keyboard. I think I just posted yesterday on my Insta about the dynamic reversal. So I can use that in my frozen shoulder patients. At the same time, if I combine with these two patterns of the upper limb, flexion, abduction, excitation pattern, and extension, adduction, introduction pattern, if I combine dynamic reversal, stabilizing reversal, and rhythmic stabilization. So these are the three techniques. I'm just telling the name of these three techniques. If I combine these three techniques with these two patterns, it really helps me to get the work to do really good work on the patient of the tendinitis of the shoulder, rotator cuff weakness, impingement syndrome. At the same time, my stroke patients, I work with these patterns. At the same time, I start training my sports patients. Now, if I just talk about like scapular patterns or my pelvic patterns, can you please repeat once the techniques? I'm going to talk about the techniques. Suppose if I talk about the scapular, we have four patterns of the scapula. So if I take my shoulder towards my TMJ joint, upward and forward to the ear, that goes my anterior elevation. If I go diagonally back into the same and down, that goes for my posterior depression. If I take it behind the ear, goes back over here, that goes my posterior elevation. If I take my elbow down towards the belly, that goes for my anterior depression pattern. So we have four patterns in the scapula. There was a column between posterior elevation, anterior depression, we have anterior elevation, we have posterior depression. Four patterns in the scapula, and these are the four patterns in the pelvis also we have. Do you guys have heard about the scoliosis? Yeah. We talk about the structural scoliosis, we talk about the functional scoliosis. If we talk about the structural, we cannot treat that. No, we can't. I mean, we have limited, as a physical therapist, we have limitations there. That can be done some modification by the surgical stuff only, right? But if we talk about the functional scoliosis, like if I get a patient of sciatica, and if I talk about the compressive neuropathy, if somebody gets the sciatica pain in the right side, the patient comes to the clinic or the patient tends to the walk with bending to the opposite side. So they would have a tendency to bend to their left side. So what happens to them? They give concavity of the opposite side and convexity of the same side to relieve that pain. At the same time, if I talk about the stroke patients, like when they get the spasticity of the quadratus lumborum, that's very, very common. Because of the spasticity quadratus lumborum, the pelvis goes in posterior elevation. And that leads to the concavity of the same side. And that also prevents them to put the feet on the ground in the stance phase, like for the foot flat, or you can say mid stance. That also prevents them for the same. So by using the scapular and pelvic patterns together, we can actually elongate those trunk area. And that's such a beauty of the PNF to work for the scoliosis. So there are hundreds of techniques in the PNF we can mix together. We can mix with the patterns. We can do without patterns. We can treat like cervical radiculopathy, cervical pain, cervical motor control disturbance, cervical thoracic dysfunction, CT joint dysfunction, sciatica. We use anti-elevation pattern of the pelvis for the sciatica pain. We combine with the neurodynamics, the PNF. We use like for all the neurological patients. So there's a lot to talk about that. So that's just an idea about the clinical importance of the PNF. And if you learn the PNF, you need to understand the clinical relevance. Okay. So there's a question: can cervical disc be treated with the PNF? Can you treat cervical disc with any other approach? I have a question from all of you in the group. Can you treat cervical disc with any approach? So guys from the group, pathological, yeah. Anybody else? Traction, all right. Mhm. degenerative, strength training, general range of motions. All right. So I have to say something the same that all of my cervical disc bulge patients or my lumbar disc bulge patients I treat with the PNF. If they get the compressive neuropathy because of the same, I start working with the head and neck pattern of the PNF or the posterior side, and that's really relieve that compression. And I mix with the traction. But if I talk about any of the disc herniation, disc bulge of any grade, can we put the disc back? No, we do not put the disc back into its. That can be done only by the microdiscectomy with the procedure. We never put the disc back into it. It's more over that over the period it gets shrink actually. But yes, we work on the symptoms. We work on the stability. We work on opening the interneurovertebral foramina, and that's how we treat that. Yes, we treat with the PNF. Okay, sure. Okay, so if I talk about the techniques of the PNF, uh, maybe you can go with the books, or if you want to write down, we have several techniques. We have rhythmic initiation. We have dynamic reversal. We have stabilizing reversal. We have rhythmic stabilization. We have combination of isotonics. We have replication. We have again initial stretch, re-stretch techniques. Uh, so we have many techniques in the PNF to work with, and the most techniques I use in my clinical practice is dynamic reversals, combination of isotonics, and stabilizing reversals. So again, I have a video on my Instagram. You guys can go and again check it of all these techniques, and that's really good. I'm not going to give the description about these techniques today. And then we talk about the role of the PNF in the gait training. So I took a last batch in Bangladesh of my PNF in December, I think last year only. Yeah. So I was teaching there for 5 days, and I took one day totally on the gait because gait is a big subject. And trust me, I have never found any other approach. Every approach has limitations. I'm not saying PNF is the best in the world. No, every approach has its limitations somehow. But the gait is one of the area I love PNF to work with, whether it's like in the stroke, in the any other cases of the neurology or orthopedic or anything. So we have lots of gait training. We work on the preparation of the gait. We work on the stability first. We work on the stance phase. We work on the swing phase. Uh, we work on the step length. We work on the registered guided training. We work on the balance training. We work with the irradiation in the gait training. So there's a lot of scope to work with. Then at the same time, we use PNF in facial Bell's palsy. We use PNF in dysphagia management. We use PNF in cerebral palsy also. But I find personally, I find PNF is really good in the cerebral palsy, but I find NDT is better in cerebral palsy than PNF. And we use PNF in different conditions. Yeah. So if you guys have any other questions, we can take it right now. So Gufran, are you there?
Yes, sir. Guys, be ready with
I,
your questions. Sir will have to leave within some time.
I think there was some question already. I think somebody has sent that. Wait a second.
1 second, sir. I'll check.
LVHA thrust. Who
HVA.
asked this question? Yeah, it has to be HVL, I believe so. High velocity, low amplitude. That's not the part of the PNF. That comes in manual therapy, basically. That comes in chiropractic, physiotherapy manipulation, osteopathies. That's not the part of the PNF now. How many repetitions? It's never fixed. Can you all see me right now or no?
Yes, sir. You are visible.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'm just because I just gone on the chat mode. So how many repetitions? It's never fixed to be honest. Like sometimes I give 10 to 15 repetitions of these techniques with the patterns. Sometimes maybe 5, sometimes maybe 20. It all depends on my goals. I want to work for the stability. I want to work for motor control. I want to work more for improving range of motion, the pain status and everything. So, but ideally 10, 15 repetitions. That's how it works. PNF in stroke patient, how to, wait a second, let me just go. PNF in stroke patient, how to approach. I love PNF in stroke patients. I love, guys, we just had a patient who came from Bangladesh all the way for our rehabilitation. And he just left after just lockdown by taking the domestic flight. And we get some international patients also at our clinic. And we get some patients from all over India who comes in PG or hotel and take the treatment to us. So we get a lot of stroke patients from outside. And if we talk about the stroke, we have a completely hand training functions with the PNF. We work on their stimulation of the movement. We work on timing for emphasizes in the hand movements. We work for approximation if it is flaccid. We work on approximation for the trunk stability in the same. We work for spasticity management with different techniques of the PNF. We work on their gait training, stability. So I have never found anything better. Like I admit that I found NDT better than PNF in the cerebral palsy, but at the same time, I know so many approaches, but I have never found anything better than PNF in the stroke patient. I haven't found anything better than PNF. Is the best approach I have found in the stroke patients. So I'm just putting again. I have lots of video of stroke rehabilitation on my Insta, and you guys can go there. I just put my Insta ID again to you and GR20, and you can just check those videos. Okay, so what are the head and neck patterns and how to use them? So the head and neck patterns are, we have flexion, side flexion, and same side of rotation. So extension, same side of flexion, same side of rotation. So we have four possibility in the head and neck. Wait a second, I have lost the question. Yeah. So we have four possibility in the head and neck pattern. Flexion, right side rotation, flexion, left side rotation, extension, left side rotation, extension, right side rotation. If I find someone with the radicular pain, I always go for my flexion pattern to open the internal foramina. If I want to work on the motor control, on the postural training, on to recruit the posterior muscle of the neck, I work with extension patterns, and I usually go for combination of isotonics technique with the neck pattern. It works amazing for the same. Where can we do these workshops? So I don't know from where you are, Suchitra. My workshops are pending. Like the first thing after the lockdown, I'm going in the October, if the things will be fine. So I'm going to take 2 days of my workshop in October in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then I'm going to teach 2 days in Kerala, and then I have a workshop scheduled in Mumbai, one in Pune, one in Surat, and one in Hyderabad. So I think six, one in Bangalore. Sorry, the Bangalore is, I was just going just before the lockdown, and we had to postpone again. So 6 or 7 locations are finally decided already. So I have taken till now 34 workshops. So we are just, as the lockdown goes away, we are going to conduct these workshops again. And I'm going to post on my Instagram or Facebook on Movement Science Academy page, which is our company which organize these workshops with the international institutes. So we are going to put about the same about, or I'll put in this WhatsApp group also, so you can join any of our workshops from wherever you are. How to decide what patterns to give in flaccid or spasticity. So that's all about our goals. Like somebody has the flexor synergy, I will go for all the patterns. I'll go for flexion, abduction, external pattern. I will go for extension, reduction, internal rotation pattern as well. I'll go for all the patterns. But how to work on flaccidity, spasticity? This is the question. Like for the flaccidity, I work a lot with the indirect treatment, irradiation. For the spasticity, I work with the ice management. I work with hold relax. I work with dynamic reversals. I work with approximations again. I work with slow and sustained stretching of the PNF. So that's how we have to decide it. Sir, please take another webinar especially for techniques. All right, we can take that maybe next time if I'm at my clinic or somewhere and I have a model and I can just demonstrate some of the things over there.
So many of them
Uh,
are asking us to have a webinar, a certified webinar. So if we can do it anytime you are free.
okay. Guy, we can do it, but you know what? I always believe that. To be
Hands
honest,
on.
it's a message to all of you that I'm a person who is totally away from all the associations. To be honest, and I just believe in doing the hard work all the time. And I believe so that certificates are really good to get that, but more than certificates, it's more about learning. That's what I believe so. Certificates are always good in your experience to put on the clinics and all. We do conduct all the courses from PNF, from our Movement Sense Academy. We can conduct that, but I think learning is the most important. So we'll discuss about the same, and we can conduct that for sure. So can we apply PNF in global delayed development patients? Yes, we do that. We do in the delayed development milestone patients. So we work on their head and neck control. We work on their different development techniques. So we work with them. How to determine the quality of our PNF techniques? Like how does it is felt by the patient when it's done perfectly? All right, I have something to say to you. Like the PNF never makes you fatigue if it has been done correctly. The most of the therapists when I teach and I train is that they use a lot of resistance in the PNF patterns, and that might lead to the fatigue. That might lead to the discomfort to the patients. PNF never gives pain to the patient; it relieves the pain. So I think these are the things can be given as a feedback by the patient, and that's what you need to understand as a therapist. And the quality is all about your body mechanics, your manual contacts, your resistance, your position, your standing, your movement along with the patient movement. Lot to do, lot to do actually. Yeah. At what stage of adhesive capsulitis we can start PNF and watch which type will be better. I start from the day one. Trust me, because I'm certified from manual concept, so I used to do a lot of mulling and Matlin. But now in my clinics, all of my adhesive capsulitis patients I just do PNF only and only PNF. That's it. I do max. I mean, maybe sometime hot pack before that, and ice pack after because that's sometime if you do some aggressive, that might lead to inflammation again. So maybe the ice pack after that. But I do all the PNF from the day one itself. Day one itself, and it takes me only 8 to 10 sessions to relieve it completely. So I start with the whole relax from the day one traction into the patterns, dynamic reversals. I have some videos you can watch that. Doctor we want in UAE. All right. So I'm going to teach in Malaysia, and then I'm going to teach in the talk is going on in Qatar. I'm going to take my workshop in Qatar, and I got a call from someone from Abu Dhabi, but I don't know the procedure of teaching there because I don't know what are the credential stuff there. But if somebody wants to conduct there in the UAE, I'm happy to come over there. I just visited the Dubai and Abu Dhabi in the month of January for Arab Health, and I would be happy to come over there, and I just love that. So if somebody organize the course for us, we'll be there in the Dubai or the Abu Dhabi. Yeah. So when in Surat, one of the college, I think SR, what is the name of the college? I'm just SRC or something like that in the Surat. They just organize my workshops, webinar, and they are going to conduct the workshops very soon in Surat. So as soon as the lockdown goes away, I'll be coming in Surat. I think Surat is the only area I have not come in India. Otherwise, I have taken my workshops in Hyderabad, Bangalore, and everywhere. So Surat, I need to come, and I'm eager to come over there. Any particular contraindication? No. There is nothing like particular contraindication. No. It's all fine. It's just that you need to check out that suppose you are going for a lot of approximation or you're going for a lot of stability things. If somebody is unstable or somebody is having kind of like post fracture cases you are treating, otherwise there's nothing special. Can we do observationship in your clinic? Yeah, you can do it. Like before lockdown, we had two of the final students and one of the intern and one of the therapists also who were doing the volunteer work. So they worked for 3 months, and we provided them some certificate also from our clinic and from our movement science academy as a volunteer practice. And we taught them chiropractic manipulations also, like we do practice in our clinical field. We taught them PNF. We taught them some osteopathy articulation techniques. We taught them some needling stuff also. So, and we gave them exposure to neurological, orthopedic, and the sports patients at the same time. So we have a clinic in Galeria Market, DLFS 4, which is a very famous in Gurgaon, very close to airport, and we have a good rehab clinic. If you want, you can contact us, and we can just look at that stuff. Another question we had, or we have missed it?
Sir, many people want you to come to Kashmir, Bangalore, and Punjab.
So Bangalore, Renu Khetwal is doing again. She already, I think, 2022 participants registered for the same, and that was supposed to be in 28th and 29th March of Bangalore. I booked my flight as well, but that we have postponed, and we'll be doing now in the month of September. So I will post that on my Instagram or on this group, and you guys can check with the Bangalore. Kashmir, I have not conducted any workshop till now, but I would be happy to conduct. If somebody conduct our workshop there, I would be happy to come over there. And I would be happy to share my knowledge and showing the demonstration also. So in some of our workshop, we even call live patients of the stroke, live patient of the pain, and we work them lively. So that the therapist even understands better about those concepts in the clinical relevance. Actually, we do that stuff also. Uh, any other questions we have missed? If anything, overhead movements, no, nothing like that.
Sir, one last question will take. How can we apply PNF in case of flaccidity?
So I already said that in the flaccidity,
Okay.
that in the case of the flaccidity, we use approximations a lot. Like I show you something. Wait a second. Wait a second. Let me just come to the video. Can you see me all?
Yes, sir, we can see you.
Okay. So suppose I get a patient of flaccidity and I want to work on the upper limb. What I do is that I work on the weight bearing. That's an approximation. At the same time, by putting the affected arm on the same, I take my positive arm into the flexion AB reduction excitation of the patient, and as a therapist, I apply resistance over there, and I work on the eccentric control also, and the concentric and the eccentric, and that gives lot of irradiation, and it reinforces the flaccid muscles of the same, I mean the affected side. I can use my trunk, my head and neck, my um, chest area for my lower limb flaccid cases. So there's a lot of scope to work with the flaccidity with the PNF. At the same time, repetition of the movement as a rhythmic initiation technique with the PNF patterns is again amazing for the flaccidity cases. And uh, we do use lots of like stimulation techniques with the PNF, facilitating techniques with the PNF for the flaccid cases. So there are a lot of scope for the different event. Sir, can you please explain more about the irradiation? So I already told you about the irradiation. That's all about radiation of the impulse from one part of the body to the another. We give intense resistance to the positive part, which cause like flow of the energy or flow of the impulse to the affected part. But at the same time, we need to learn that first very well before applying that, because if you do not practice it rightly, that radiation of the impulse might go wrong, and that can lead to more of associated reaction in the body. If you must have heard about that associated reaction, so we need to avoid that also. So we need to learn that perfectly before applying that. Yes. Okay. How to choose between brainstorm and what was the question? Actually, I'm doing from my mobile, so
And
I just want to
PNF
quickly.
for treatment of hemiplegia. How to choose between
All right.
brainstorm.
So it's how to choose between PNF and DT, how to choose between PNF and your roots approach, how to use between PNF and motor learning program. So, guys, you know what I believe that sometimes we have to combine the things sometimes because the human body is one. It. Brainstorm always said that use the tone hypertonicity to convert into the strength. I agree with that to some extent because, like, suppose you give the approximation to the spastic arm, that will lead to the uh, in the reduction of the tone also, as well as it will develop the strength also. So somehow, some part of the brainstorm can be taken in the PNF. But if you talk about the, if you want to choose something, PNF is absolutely amazing. Just go for it. Yeah. So how can we do PNF certification like you have done PNF levels? Please guide us, sir. Okay. So like we do 2 days workshop from our Movement Science Academy. But those levels you are talking about, those are done from international PNF associations, which conduct courses in all over the world on like after 2 months, like sometime in, they have come to India also now, and they do conduct in Singapore, Poland, Germany, Serbia, Holland, US, Australia, different countries. So can go and check on the international PNF website as well. That can be done. And I'm also trying to get international PNF association in India in Mumbai next year. So I'm talking to them and I'm trying to get their certificate program also to India. So that's what we are doing. That. Yeah.
Great, sir. So I guess we will end with the question sessions now.
So what will be the charges, sir? So for are you okay for international certification for initial 2 levels? I paid like 1.2 lakhs. I think I have paid something around 6-7 lakhs or more than that. I don't know. I have paid till for level 4B. But yes, if you talk about my workshops, it all depends on the organizer how much they charge. So the fund from where you are. Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah. From where you are?
Sir, I am
I mean, which
nearer to
city you live?
Mumbai.
You're near to Mumbai. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So like it all depends on the organizer. I don't know because it's I mean they book my flight, they book my hotel. So like they charge like for 2 days they charge 5,000 from participant or 5,500 or 6,000 or 4,000. It depends on the organizer. So they charge from the participants. That way they do it. So you can check with the organizers for the same. Only in Gurgaon we organize ourselves. Otherwise, we give like we organize in combination with the organizers, so they charge that. So,
Sir, the timer
any
has
possible?
appeared. Uh,
Perfect.
yeah.
So good to all. I mean, happy to be connected to all of you. If you guys have more queries, you can ping us on Instagram. You can ping us on WhatsApp group, and we can answer with the same. And thank you to all of you for being connected. I hope you got some idea about the PNF, and we guys can chat each other. We guys can learn from each other again. So and
Uh,
thanks to the organizer for this stuff.
Thanks a lot, Rohit sir. It was very informative session. And guys, thanks a lot for joining. All about physiotherapy in collaboration with Movement Science Academy. And Dr. Rohit Gupta sir was a speaker, and it was great to hear. And it was very knowledgeable, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
I just have a one message to say.
Yes, sir.
We have done I think more than 25 webinars, all the free webinars in this period. We haven't charged anything.
Right.
We have done lots of webinars of OMT also in this period, lockdown period. But next Saturday, Sunday, we are going to do with Anne Mary, who is the international Pilates instructor from Ireland. So we are going to conduct next Saturday, Sunday Pilates course. That's a certification, international certification course for 2 days, and
Yes.
that's with some charges. That just the fees she's charging from us, and that's very reasonable charges. So I'm gonna put the flyer if anybody wants to join and for 2 days for 5 hours classes and want to get a certification in the mat platters can join that. So that's what can be done. So thank you all. See you guys. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot, sir. Take care.